Thank you, nice lady. And then just to introduce Annemie, welcome, Annemie. Thank you ever so much for doing this. Annemie Ress is the founder of Purple Beach, which has lots of lovely content. We'll send some links around later so you can enjoy some of the expertise that's there. She's the former global HR director at Skype, global head of people innovation at eBay, and senior HR director at eBay and PayPal Europe. So lots to draw on. And she believes we should create a people innovation manifesto, so a way of creating and building through people the innovation which organizations need now more than ever. So how we're going to work today is Annemie's going to talk for around 15-20 minutes, see how you go, whatever you think best, Annemie, and then we'll go into breakout rooms where we're going to ask you to mull over how do you want to improve how you innovate through people. So I'll repeat the question later, but basically it could be through HR, it could be through managers, it could be through Amy's HR strategy, for instance, it could be through the LT, it could be through the employee deal. So we'll come to that later into breakout rooms. Please raise, beg your pardon, please put questions and suggestions via chat throughout, and I'll pick those up, Annemie. Put yourself on mute if you wouldn't mind for now. And Annemie, all over to you. Thank you ever so much again for doing this.
Thank you, Richard. When you were saying there, please raise, I thought you were going to say, please raise a glass. And I was like, oh, it's a bit early, but we can all do that, I'm sure, if we have to. So good morning, everyone. I am really just trying today to provoke your thinking. I'm not saying that anything I'm saying is the right way or the only way to do things, but what I really am talking about is a mindset that I really feel passionate about, that I think people leaders, HR leaders, and fundamentally even business leaders need to embrace. So this whole notion of people innovation emerged, for me, maybe 10, 12 years ago, where I increasingly saw businesses struggle with innovation. So whether it was business model innovation or innovation in the context of products. And more often than not, what I noticed though is that the reason they were struggling was because there was this disconnect between the people they were expecting to make the innovation happen and the actual innovation that they expected to happen. So in short, what that meant is they were not treating people who were supposed to drive innovation in innovative ways, whether it related to how the teams were set up, how they were led, how they were communicated to, how they were engaged with. And I think that's really where I started thinking of this notion of people innovation. That's one data point. I also would like to say, though, that for me, although I mentioned the term people innovation, it relates less to the notion of innovation in a business per se in the good times, but it also relates for me to simply being innovative, even in the context of the day-to-day that we experience. And I think we would have seen so many examples of innovation, people innovation, emerge during COVID. And Richard and I were just talking a minute ago saying, we really think actually that potentially now the macroeconomic challenges, this crazy environment where who knows what's coming next is facing us, is again an opportunity for us as people leaders to be innovative, even on the day to day, even in the what might seem that which we're quite used to. And so before I forget, as Richard said, please put comments and questions, disagreement, anything in the chat, because I think, that will make it just so much richer. So what happened is over the years, I've constantly been speaking about what we need is, yes, we had personnel, we moved towards HR in many instances, although we still need to work on this, have a seat at the table. I also see a natural progression because of the pace of technology change, just the pace in what work, the pace of change in relation to what work means, that for me a natural evolution is personnel, HR, and towards people innovation. Because I think the days of doing what we've done in the past and expecting that we'll get the same results or even better results are over. There's maybe there's a comment in the chat or just someone saying something, but I'm quite used to looking as well. Oh, so it's just morning, everyone. Oh, that's Richard. Okay. I think the world that we're living in, and I'm sure many of you would have heard this, not a new term again, but I think it's so apt to describe the world we're in, and also why I feel that we need to make the shift from personnel HR to embracing people innovation in our practices. Really is a world filled with wicked problems. So again, not a new term, but I think more true than ever. So the world we used to face in the past, right, is, and we often still have these types of problems in our day to day. So there are three kinds of problems. The world in the past mainly was the world of simple problems, where we have a problem and we know the solution and we can act on it. I would say pre-pandemic, we were kind of in a world of complex problems where more often than not, we'd have a problem, didn't know the solution, but we could figure it out. And increasingly, I would say since the macroeconomic challenges we faced in, feels like ages ago, last economic downturn was 2008. Since then the pandemic, the world we find ourselves in is a world of wicked problems. And this is where we need people innovation. So wicked problems defined means it's a world where we face problems and challenges, but we're not really sure what the problem or challenge is. So it takes us as much time to figure out what's really going on here as it then takes us to find solutions. And then what makes this whole situation truly wicked is that more often than not, once we have developed a solution to the problem that took a little bit of time to figure out, the problem changes. And that's why it's wicked. So it's not really this simple, complex, but actually it's a world of wicked problems. And this is really where we need to be super innovative in how we respond to people. Now, whilst I also say that we need to start with us as a profession, I think what is equally important is that once we embrace this mindset, we can also truly start asking our leaders and managers to embrace this. Now, clearly, there are things where we can't be innovative, right, and practice people innovation. So, for instance, in the context of regulation or of, just the things that we have to do to make sure that, we're compliant to legislation, etc. I'm not saying necessarily apply people innovation in the context of how you apply a regulation. But I am saying sometimes when it comes to once you have applied a regulation, so think of, the context of a separation agreement, think of redundancies and what comes after, how we treat people, there still are opportunities. Obviously, we always need to be compliant with our legal frameworks, but in the solutions we develop, I think there is a huge opportunity to be much more innovative in how we meet, treat, and engage with people that will actually have a far more positive impact on our employer brand longer term. Now, there are a couple of principles that over the last 10 years, I've looked at where are examples, sources of inspiration that actually when people ask me what's people innovation, to be able to say more than, businesses need to be as innovative with their people as they are with, that they expect to make innovation happen as they are with their innovation processes. I started looking at where are sources of inspiration that could actually help me write down a couple of principles in a manifesto. And these are just my thoughts, right? That would at least give a little bit more meat or flesh to the bone. I don't know what the right expression is. And again, these are not new principles, which is super interesting. But there is a nuance in each of them. So these are principles that I feel if you or we hold on to them every time we're confronted with a wicked problem, it could lead us down the road of being more innovative, practicing more people innovation in relation to the solutions that we come up with. And then just one more point that I wanted to make. Whilst we live in a world of wicked problems, I also fundamentally believe and have said from day one, well, not day one, but since it was really clear that the world has changed, that I don't think there is a new normal. I think what we'll be in, again, think of my context of wicked problems, is that we're going to be in a constant new. The new is here. The new is going to be part of what we are and who we, need to work with, etc., how we need to work. And in consequence, that's also why I think people innovation is so important. So, some of the manifesto principles, and there are 5, and if you look at our website, you can read the whole manifesto with just some little examples of where we found these being brought to life. As I said, not new, but there are some nuances in how these are applied. So the first principle is ask big questions and then invest in listening. And so, what I've noticed is those businesses or leaders who are able to practice and be truly innovative with their people, zoom out, even if they're confronted with, a small question. And I'm happy to give some examples, but I'm also watching the time. And then what they do is they truly listen to the answers they get from their employees. But here is where the nuance comes in. They also listen to what is not being said. So they go, we asked our employees, I'm making it up, right, around flexible working. They're all telling us they want to work from home 2 days a week and in the office 3 days a week. Okay, so we can take that at face value. But in order to find an opportunity to really hear what they're saying, but also to innovate around how we come up with the solution, what are they not telling us? What do we need to dig into to truly find, an innovative solution? And again, just FYI, I'm not saying we have to innovate in every single instance. I'm just giving you examples to bring this to life. The second one is, the second principle is really find your massive transformative purpose. And I think this is super important. Yes, massive transformative purpose is why do we exist? Why are we there? But I think when it comes to the context of HR or people leaders, it's also for us to answer, why are we here as a team in this business? And what is the big transformation that we want to bring about? I'm not saying clearly we're in service of the business transformation when needed or in service of the business purpose, but why are we really here? And how can we make that a key driver of our own people and HR mindset, a key driver in making a difference to the organization? And if you, as a people team, have that as an anchor, then every single thing we faced with, whether, day to day or more exceptional, we anchor our thinking in our purpose, and our purpose then more often than not, if it's aspirational, will require us to go beyond what we normally do or would have done in the past, i.e. to innovate. The third principle is called flatten as much as you can and embrace a pirate mentality. So years ago, I worked with someone who looked at Kira Meyer Phillips, who looked at pirates and how they innovated, but she looked at pirates through the ages. She looked at proper pirates who were on ships. She looked at the unofficial economy, if we can call them that, and how they, for instance, during the last macroeconomic crisis, were actually able to survive. And it wasn't because of their illegal activities, but it was really because they were consistently trying to see around the corner what's coming next. They were consistently asking input from absolutely all aspects and quarters, and leaders in the context of the pirate economy or this whole concept of pirates were often servant leaders, which we know, right? So they would put their people before themselves. And so, the third principle I'm calling embrace the pirate mentality is really, constantly try and see around a corner and really reach across multiple levels in an organization. And again, I know you guys know this, but sometimes we just forget to do it because, life and work and pressures happen. So the fourth principle is don't ignore, but reframe failure to encourage people innovation. So reframing failure, right, is how one would do that. Is we all know the old saying, it's not bad to fail, and we all learn from failure, and startups fail. And I work with a lot of startups who constantly fail and then, start again. But I think what is really important, both for us as HR and people leaders, but also in an organization, is this reframing of failure, because we all know that we tell people it's okay to fail in an organization, but we also know you can only fail so many times. And we also know there's still a stigma attached to it. And so this reframing of failure to encourage innovation is really around saying, really being conscious of seeing failure as an opportunity, recognizing failure, the learning from failure. And again, through that saying, actually, a failure is not a failure. In this given instance, maybe the failure we experienced here was a near miss. And we nearly got there. But what we often do when we fail with projects or initiatives is we throw everything away. Instead of saying, okay, we got there 70%, but if we did, what's that 30% that we missed out on? So instead of just saying we failed and we learned lovely lessons, let's focus on that near miss, the 30%, because that, if we dig deep into that, could offer us opportunities for innovating and winning. And then the last point is just, as I already said, the new is part of, I muted myself, sorry. The new is part of what we are, how we do things, and having this mindset of the new normal is not coming. I'm sorry to say that. The old normal is not coming. But what we are facing with and will be faced with is the new, and that's what we need to focus on. So as I said to you, just a very, very quick thought starter, and hopefully a couple of principles there that can provide you with some inspiration. And I can see that there are some questions I'm happy to look at, Richard, now or later. But I'm happy also to comment if it's helpful.
Thanks, Annemie. There's some really interesting comments there, actually. It's less questions, more reflections. There's a couple of really good ones from Fiona and Julia.
So I think the first one, so yeah, Fiona, yours, right? Which is, I certainly think we're dealing with many different issues, and those that might have been straightforward in the past are more complex. Yeah, even very good point, right? So even the complex challenges have become wicked, and both people and the business expectations are higher, right? And it's really interesting, some of the work we do outside the people and leadership space, where we look at pure commercial innovation and we look at customer expectations, is that we're seeing this really interesting trend, which is customer expectations. So we work, for instance, with a very big engineering business or with a couple of financial services businesses. Customers traditionally who would want to buy valves and see a salesperson are expecting an Amazon, a Google, and a Netflix-like experience in their interactions with, with the typical 150-year-old engineering business. So their expectations have been rose because of that. And similarly, the employees, and increasingly I'm seeing across the board, are having similar expectations. So I think you're totally right. And so Julia, I think you mentioned the market has shifted, employee driven, which means we need to continue to innovate to attract and retain, totally, in this whole war for talent, or whatever we want to call it. And again, fully agree with you. So in the context of having to do more with less, how do we do that and innovate around how we retain people? And frankly, I like this notion of what you call out there, which feels like anything is possible within the relationship, right? Innovation gives hope, is inspiring. And I think the part I didn't say is, how do you make employees part of this innovation process? Can be a great employee engagement opportunity.
Excellent. Thanks ever so much, Annemie. So we're going to go to breakout rooms, and thanks to Fiona and Julia for your points there. Actually, Julia, did you a bit of disservice, because I said picked up on the feels like anything is possible. You had a nuance which I missed out, which is within the relationship, which I thought was key, actually. So yes. Thanks both. So we're just going to go to breakout rooms now for around about 20 minutes. We'll get you back about 11:40 for more Q&A and thoughts from you. And the question on the table is, how do you want to improve how you innovate through people? So how do you want to improve how you innovate through people? Could be processes, could be strategy, could be through HR itself, as I say. And so apologies in advance if you get moved around in the breakout rooms at any point, for instance, if you're in the same one as somebody else from your organization, but hopefully that won't happen. We'll open the breakout rooms now, and we'll see you in about 20 minutes. Thanks again, Annemie.
This meeting is being recorded.
We'll open it up for Q&A and your thoughts and ideas. Annemie, if I could start with you, actually, how was your conversation?
It was really quite fun. Well, I hope. And I'd rather ask Deborah and Lewis, but I think we covered everything from the difference between creativity and innovation to Gen Z to driving experimentation to having a different conversation to parent-child versus adult-to-adult relationships. So it went all over the show. So I don't know, Deborah or Lewis, if you wanted to say anything.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting. We were talking about. I was asking about what was the difference between innovation and creativity. Are they different? Are they the same? And I really like that definition of that innovation is a marriage between creativity and pragmatism. So I think that is about, you can be creative and have lots of ideas, but then actually doing something about it, and they needing to be resourced. And needing to be sponsored in order for action to actually happen. I think it's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, that's a nice definition. So it's a marriage between creativity and...
Yeah, not mine is Annemie's definition.
Innovation is the marriage of creativity and pragmatism.
Right, okay. So, yes, so always focus on the outcome, I presume. Yeah, not just the process. Okay, interesting. And if I could throw it open to the group, what did you think? Just raise your hand, either literally or on the screen. What was it that you thought that you'd like to change about how you innovate through people at the moment? Is it that good? Louise.
Yeah, and apologies, Cynthia, I'm going to steal your phrase here just to bring the conversation going. But we really liked in our group the phrase that Cynthia used, as in "Yes, you can" campaign, because sometimes there's a view that it's up to the senior leadership team to resolve problems, innovate, etc. And actually, it's more around empowering all of our people to just say when things aren't right, but then also potential what's the solution, rather than come to you with what the problem is. And then I was just sort of saying about how much do we also ask the end user, our people, our colleagues, what they want, rather than in our ivory tower of HR people functions coming up with what we think is a great next benefit or policy, when actually it doesn't make any difference to them on the front line. So it's also about asking, what's the problems we're trying to solve, empower colleagues to actually deliver it themselves as well, if they have that within their remit, but then also, is it going to make the real difference to those people that actually need it?
I guess that's even more relevant, Louise, if it's a wicked problem, to use Annemie's phrasing. Is that right, Annemie?
100% so, right? And I love the fact that we can make a significant difference, right? As people leaders, we don't have to wait for the business.
I'm just going to flip to Cynthia, because Cynthia, you obviously were inspiring some people in your room.
So I mean, Louise has said it all really, but I think it's also about, apart from empowering them, so yes, you can, but it's also looking at our risk appetite. And if we want people to innovate, we should expect them to fail at some stage, and we should allow that. We really need to understand how far we're willing to go in terms of risk and failure, and get them to do things on their own. They might make mistakes, but innovation doesn't come without an error. Just think about penicillin, for example, and how we got that. So people need to be able to fail, but they come up, as they make those mistakes, they come up with even better innovations as they grow.
Yeah, and Cynthia, if I can just jump in there, I think that, and that's where the reframing of failure is so important, right? So yes, you can fail. Let's look at what part. I mean, not everything in a failure could have been a failure, right? Let's identify the 20% and build on that to make the next iteration of whatever the innovation is that we're working on.
Like it. Thanks both. Martin, welcome. Nice to see you. Oh, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Rookie error there. So I had a follow-up question to Annemie in terms of, so someone mentioned champions, and then there's another comment around, you don't have to do it with the business, but something I think we're ideally quite an innovative team, and we know we're facing big challenges, and we're kind of approaching that with big thinking. But I'd be interested to know, how do you get the executive team on board to something like this? Because I think the two big challenges we've seen are leading beyond the authority, where maybe it involves a number of different teams, so like technology teams that are under-resourced and overworked, and they don't really want to be focusing on this, but we kind of need a digital solution to bring about big change. But the other one's just getting executives on board with this, because and so I'd be curious about getting that champion and how you get momentum at that level first.
So the bad news is, like we all know, there's no silver bullet magic wand. It's the problem that we all constantly face. So that's the bad news. But what I've seen work is in the context, so for instance, your example around digital, and that's also something we discussed in our breakout, is we often go with a request, which is we need a digital solution. But I'm making it up, right? But what if we went with, the thinking around what is the smallest thing that could, this is our big journey of 10 steps, break our journey down towards an innovation that we need to achieve. What is the smallest thing that we can ask for, or that we can, request as an innovation, and, versus asking for all of it in one go? Obviously, you need to say this is where we ultimately want to go. But for me, it's like those small baby steps, smallest thing that can have the biggest impact in getting us closer to where we need to go. And I think I've seen that works better than going with a request, which I'm not sure if you did that. And then on the executive sponsor front, I found talking to them about, so for the first time in many years, actually ever, I'm talking to CEOs who say to me, I don't know how to deal with this. I honestly don't know. I had the answers before, but if you've got a brave and courageous leader, they will open up to you as their trusted partner and say, I don't know how to, kind of normalize. We are in this world of wicked problems. You might not want language we're using here, right? So you might want to describe it in language that they understand, because it might sound a bit gimmicky to them. The confidence that, it's normalized, this is where we are. And then there's a different way of doing it. I've seen that works. Provide, a potential champion or sponsor that actually naturally cares about this stuff, right? I've never seen one be able to turn someone who doesn't have passion for people into a champion or a sponsor. And so again, I come back to my point also in the context of, even with leaders, baby steps, right? Instead of asking them to be a champion for the whole initiative, just ask them to be a sponsor for something small, so that you can have some quick wins. There's something called the progress principle. If you have a look at it, I think there's a website, was a book by a woman called Teresa Amabile that we often use. And it really talks about the importance of creating a sense of progress. And whether with leaders or with employees, or even that team that you might want to deliver a digital product, as soon as people can see, wow, we have had a small win, we've made some progress, or even if we failed, we've learned something, or it doesn't take so much of my time. That's also when you can then start doing the building blocks. But I'm sure all of you guys know all of this stuff. But the key thing I would leave with you is smallest thing, biggest impact. That can have the biggest impact, and chunk the journey down versus the bigger asks, and be super strategic around building those relationships with your potential sponsors, right? Segment them like you would segment customers. And when I led HR teams, I literally would have people in my team be the buddy of an executive, and I'd be very clear, and this sounds like really calculated, but we have to think that way. What do we need to get through this relationship? Who matches best with this exec, and how can we reciprocally support them and they support us? But those are just some reflections, with a caveat being it's hard.
That's a very good answer. I like that. And Martin, I hope that helped. Actually, you raised two good points though. How do you engage people, and how do you engage leadership, which I guess is part of the how you improve innovation through people, very much so. So I'd just like to throw it to the group, actually. How have you engaged people with innovation, and how have you engaged leadership particularly? Have you used champions, for instance? Have you used the baby steps that Annemie was talking about? What's worked best, would you say? Or what hasn't worked as well, I suppose, is the other side of it. What did you learn from that?
Not sure I'm going to answer your question, but one of the things we were talking about in our group was the challenge around, you know, post-COVID, the hybrid working, the different generations you're managing in the workplace. You know, how do you drive innovation as something that people want to walk towards? So we were talking about the fact that actually there's lots of people that don't want to get involved at the moment. They almost want to come in, do their job, go home. So how do you create some excitement around innovation and some of the benefits that it can bring? We didn't necessarily the things we were talking about.
Yeah, and my pragmatic answer here is, do you need to engage and involve in, you know, everybody? Maybe it's okay. Exactly right. So maybe it's okay for some people just to come in, and that's fine, right? As long as, so in my mind, I always think about 3 categories, right? So I think about the champions or sponsors, those who were, you know, kind of in the middle, but they're not detractors, and you can potentially get them over the line. And then those who just never will get there. And it's not about ignoring the ones who never will get there, but it's also about being really focused in a world where we have so little time to focus our attention. I would just always focus on the top bucket and then the middle bucket, not forgetting the lower one. So don't get me wrong. But I don't think everybody needs to be involved in it. Having said that, what I have seen, that once the innovation bug starts growing and people are recognized and rewarded for it, and you know, you create a bit of FOMO, so fear of missing out, which again goes back to how you talk about the innovation story in your organization. You do start taking those who just didn't want to do it along on a journey, right? But yeah, so those are a couple of reflections.
Thanks, Annemie. And Fiona, I like your phrase that how you get them to walk towards it. It's a nice way of putting it, actually. So they come of their own volition through exciting them. So I just want to go to Rachel and then come back to Martin. Rachel, thanks.
Thank you, Richard. I think one of the examples we shared in our group, in the department I work in, from the sort of middle management down, there's been a sense that innovation can be created quite easily. Where the issue has been is more with the senior CEOs, perm sex, etc., where the dynamic is changing so quickly that they're just in that reactive delivery mode. And it's a bit of that carrot and stick that was mentioned earlier about how can we demonstrate and show you what we can do if we just paused and was courageous enough to be able to say, look, we just need to sort of stop what we're doing because we will deliver bigger and better things. So it's just that hybrid disconnection at the moment that we discussed earlier.
Yeah, and I think the one way of bridging that gap is by choosing things that you could just do that can show the success of it working, not necessarily in their context. So it's kind of just do it, what you can do within a framework, and then show and tell the story of, you know, how successful those things could be. I think my point earlier, or maybe it was in our breakout, right? It doesn't mean that you can't be innovative on the value today stuff. So maybe where you're working with leaders who are, you know, so for very obvious reasons focused on value today, it's not about asking them to innovate and think of tomorrow. Maybe ask them to innovate in the context of today even. So what are our opportunities for doing things differently in the context of our day today? And by the way, in doing that, we build a muscle that will then, you know, stand us in good stead once we can focus on value tomorrow. So yeah, I think that's how I would always answer that.
Thanks, Annemie. It makes me think, Rachel, your question makes me think that it's not just wicked problems, it's a wicked context at the moment as well. It's a sort of wider than that as well, almost ongoing. To steal your phrase, Annemie. Martin.
Yeah, just in answer to your question around things I guess we've been doing, we haven't really spoken about big things like innovation. I think it can be a bit of a daunting phrase, but picking up on that, sort of how you consider the learnings from things. We've recently charted out a culture charter which focuses heavily on sort of learning, the growth mindset, and we're working on a feedback culture as well. So sort of a lot of the underpinning building blocks, I guess, that you utilize as part of innovation are forming part of our talent work, but especially the growth mindset as an approach. And I guess that's what we'll be focusing on a lot of our training as well.
Oh, thanks for sharing.
Just very quickly, one last point. I think you're making a super important point there. I think you are, which is also, and I made it a few times, which is I rarely use the language of innovation, people innovation, MVPs, blah, blah, blah. I think it's around, or, choosing the language, describing what you need to do, describing what you want to achieve, but in language that people will hear and understand. So it doesn't become this thing which is like, oh, we're all going to innovate, and that's going to be this big thing. Well, maybe, we're just going to do things differently. Let's try something alternative. Let's come up with new ideas. And I think that's also important, because often innovation has this brand or something attached to it that makes it almost feel unattainable, something for the future, we don't have time for it, etc. So for me, the language and what we use is also super important.
Yeah, not least the growth mindset. We're just coming to the end of the session. So Martin, thank you for that. Thank you everybody for coming along. Very nice to see you all. Annemie, thank you for putting so much thought and energy into it. We'll share the links about the People and Innovation Manifesto and the points you've made. And also just to say some great links on your website too on Purple Beach. Thank you everybody. We'll see you at another event soon. Annemie, much appreciated. Cheers everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.